The frontman of famous rock band Simple Minds was born 9th of July 1959. When he was a kid, his mother played Beatles records, and she would dance while Jim jumped around. His father had a diverse taste in music, influenced by his work colleagues who would bring back records from all around the world, blues, soul, country. Since pubs in Glasgow used to shut at 9 o'clock, everyone would go up to each other's house and have a sing-song. It was in this atmosphere which Jim Kerr was raised. The performers he saw at the Citizens Theatre inspired his lifelong appreciation for live music. Jim Kerr speaks rather fondly of his home city, Glasgow. However, when he was younger, he dreamed of travel and wanted to get out of Glasgow to see the world.
In fact, when we were 16, Charlie Birchall and myself couldn't wait to get out of it. We went and we hitchhiked all around Europe.
Jim met Charlie Birchall at Holyrood Secondary School. Many of their friends were getting into music at the time, but few were taking it the extra mile. Back then, Jim and Charlie knew no one else who played in a band. But Jim Kerr was prepared to do anything to be involved with the world of music, and so encouraged his friends to rehearse. They used to have band meetups at their local primary school. "I was always pushing for things to happen," Jim said in an interview. One day, Jim, maybe a little bit tipsy, decided to step in as the band's temporary singer.
One night, I guess Dutch courage, I maybe had been drinking too much cider. I said, okay, I'll sing, but as long as you promise not to tell anyone.
To this day, Charlie reminds him that they're still waiting for the real singer to come along. Keith Forsey and Steve Schiff were writing the soundtrack of The Breakfast Club, a classic 80s film, and wanted Simple Minds to record the opening song. They approached the band, asking them to perform Don't You Forget About Me, but were bluntly turned down. "It almost didn't happen," said Jim Kerr. Keith and Steve persisted, saying that Don't You Forget About Me sounded like a Simple Minds song, which further offended the band, who prided themselves on their unique sound.
And it even got worse because someone from the record company got in touch and said, "No, you'll love it, because it sounds just like you," which offended us.
Jim Kerr blames the band's reluctance on the fact they were young and precious. Eventually, Keith and Steve's persistence won the band over, and they agreed to record the song. What began as a recording for a motion picture soundtrack would soon earn the nickname The Black Hit from Space. When Jim and Charlie began to write music, they did so in a Lennon-McCartney fashion, sitting at the table together, Charlie with his guitar and Jim with his notebook. Initially, they didn't know what a bridge was, and hardly knew what a verse and chorus were. As Jim Kerr phrased it, "We had no teaching of any sort, there were no mentors." However, the band still had many inspirations. The Rolling Stones inspired Simple Minds to keep recording. David Bowie not only served as a guideline to the possibilities of what could be done with pop music, but gave Simple Minds the name of their band. Bowie's song The Gene Genie goes,
"So simple-minded, can't drive his muggle, lights on the neon and sleeps in a capsule."
But Simple Minds once had another name, Johnny and the Self-Abusers. Their first live performance avoided the stereotypical audience of one man and a dog. Because of a recent riot at a local gig, visiting punk bands were banned across Glasgow. Johnny and the Self-Abusers were not a visiting band, they were from Glasgow. As a result, at their first gig, every punk in the city had turned up, since there were no other punk rock bands around. Jim Kerr recalls, "From the very first chord, the place went mental." This was the moment Jim and Charlie had an intuition to start taking music seriously. Johnny and the Self-Abusers broke up on the same day they released their single, Saints and Sinners, and became Simple Minds, a band more seriously orientated towards success. To Jim Kerr, success was never about becoming a mainstream pop band. In his words, "We didn't know about record sales then. We didn't know about the riches, we didn't know about the rewards." The band simply wanted to be able to travel around the world with their music, and make a lifetime out of it. 17th of January 1978, Simple Minds was part of a 4-band bill, a punk rock show at Glasgow's Satellite City. This was their big break. Kerr thought Simple Minds already had an attitude and a sound, which allowed them to succeed at the gig. Most of us were on the dole. Recording their first record, Life in a Day, the band was struggling a bit financially. Jim recalls that everything depended on the demo cassettes they passed around in London. Before releasing their first album, Simple Minds went around in a van performing at various gigs, and in Edinburgh they opened for the Pleasers. They also played with GNX.
They were the most glamorous thing I'd ever seen. We stood with our duffel coats on, kind of watching them getting off the bus. I mean, Billy Idol, he just looked like a Greek god.
Jim Kerr married Chrissy Hind in 1984, with whom he had a daughter, Yasmin. When asked how he felt about becoming a father, he couldn't escape the old cliches.
I'm really excited about being a dad now, because that's a huge change in your life as well.
I think there, the only comments I've got in that would be really the obvious cliches, over the moon and everything, but I don't know.
At around this time, the members of Simple Minds watched curiously as the black hit from space began to creep up the charts. Suddenly, the band had forever rooted themselves in the soundtrack of the 80s. Don't You Forget About Me became a classic. Simple Minds were working with Jimmy Iovine, an American entrepreneur and record executive, when Don't You Forget About Me charted at #1. Apparently, Jimmy drove them crazy.
He was saying, he was driving us crazy. How are you going to follow that? How are you going to follow that? You're going to be a one-hit wonder as opposed to a two-hit wonder.
The band's next single was Alive and Kickin'. According to Jim Kerr, the song came out and it was just an absolute failure. It only went to #2 in the charts. Over the course of their long career, the band have released 18 albums, but it wasn't always easy going. Towards the end of 1990, the friendships which held the band together were put under strain, and the next decade saw many members drop out and be replaced. Jim Kerr said, "We were knackered, we were desensitized, the band started to fracture." Keyboardist McNeil decided that he needed a break and played his last concert in Brisbane. Bruce Finlay, the band's manager, was dismissed. 1990 was also the year Jim and Chrissy would split up. He remarried actress, model and singer Patsy Kensit in '92, only to go through another divorce in '96. But Jim Kerr and Simple Minds found their feet again.
But I think you have to go away and then come back to fully appreciate a place.
Even though Jim is a traveller, at heart he is Glaswegian, and growing older, his appreciation for his home has deepened. In a 2019 interview with The National, he said, "We're all carved from a certain rock, and in my case, that rock is Glasgow." For 45 years, Jim has lived his dream of travelling the world with a live performing band.
Can you believe after years and years and years of playing music, we still get nervous when we play in Scotland?
In 2017 and 2018, the band played over 150 shows worldwide. This year, in January, Simple Minds released a recording of their single Act of Love to mark the anniversary of their first performance at Satellite City. Jim Kerr said of the song, "Back in 1978, this was the first song anyone heard from Simple Minds. It became our rallying cry, our banner. Both Charlie and I have relished the opportunity to now rescue the song from obscurity by remodeling it in a style both nostalgic and yet in keeping with where Simple Minds are today."